So, sir, thank you for sitting down with us today to share the state of AMC, your assessment of the command after 2 years in command, and then the future outlook of where we're going. So let's start there, if you will. You've been in position for 2 years. You're going into your third year. Reflect back on your time in command, and what were your initial goals when you took over at Army Materiel Command?
Well, Kim, as you remember, because you've been with me since the beginning, what I used to be able to work my way through is what the past commanders have done, right? You have to see yourself, what has been done, and then move forward. So quickly, under the great leadership of General Dunwoody, right, during her tenure, I will articulate her accomplishment was by bringing the enterprise together, right? She took the whole sustainment and logistics enterprise, and she placed it under her umbrella during her tenure. Very simply said, very difficult to do, but she did it magnificently. And then General Vi, my predecessor, I think he took the work that she did, General Dunwoody, and he extended the enterprise. There was pockets of people being deployed and in support of the war, but General Vi really codified that, and he enabled support to all the COCOM commanders, right? And so, his thought was that they couldn't do without the patch, and that was exemplified by our great soldiers and civilians that were put forward in support of them. My goal, quite frankly, much simpler. They had very difficult tasks, and I'm the benefit of that. My goal was to operationalize what we did, to make sure that we collectively, from me all the way down to the entire workforce, all the way down to the janitor in each of our locations, understood our mission. And our mission is about support to the warfighter. That is our purpose. We are responsible for the logistics and material readiness of the entire Army. All three compos, Guard, Reserve, and Active Force, around the world, 24/7, 365 days a year. And my goal was to make sure everybody understood and embraced that.
So, 2 years later, what are your thoughts on the state of AMC today? How did we do?
I think we've made great strides. I think building on those blocks created by those previous leaders, and then with the vision of operationalizing our efforts, I think we're doing wonderful. I think we're well known, and we are called upon to be enablers at all times. You've heard me say many times, we are ING. We are supporting to the force. We are never ED. We are never supported. And that takes a great deal of both art and science. We have to understand the requirement, which is the science, and we have to apply the art. How do we get ahead of the requirement to enable and provide commanders in the field with options? We got to get out of the reaction mode, and what we want to be is silently successful. And I think we're making great strides on that. With that said, though, we have some work to do. We collectively, from me all the way down, are still learning how to see ourselves, how to understand what's happening in the environment, and then with the enemy, and then making adjustments. There's a lot going on in the world. The Army op tempo is faster than I've ever seen it. Now, based on hard work and dedication of both the leaders in AMC and the workforce, we have set a lot of foundation that enables us to be agile and adaptive and innovative. What I coach all the time, though, is we don't want that to be our go-to move. We want to do blocking and tackling, and that's where we're starting to really make headway in that area.
So you've spent a lot of time on the road, and part of it's very important mission of seeing AMC, right? Going out and seeing the major subordinate commands and the AMC enterprise. As you've engaged with the folks in the field within AMC that do the mission, what are your takeaways?
Well, first of all, we have an incredible, resilient, agile and adaptive, innovative workforce, as I said. These great men and women, both military and civilian, are crushing it. They are fully engaged. They have one thought in mind, and that is, what can they do to support the warfighter? Really proud of that. They're doing magnificent. With that said, we're still having a little bit of difficulty discerning one face to the field. We collectively as an organization, 9 major subordinate commands, are in great support of the warfighter. And we've created Army Sustainment Command and our Army Field Sustainment Brigades to be that one face to the warfighter. Sometimes as we try to do our jobs to the best of our ability, we get out in front of our headlights a little bit.
Right.
We collectively are all trying to solve the problem in different areas, where we need to be better at synchronizing and integrating the total force of AMC into the solution. That's my responsibility through the 9 major subordinate commanders, and we're getting better at that, but we're not quite there. We need to just allow Army Sustainment Command to be the quarterback of our field army and let them direct, synchronize, and integrate the supporting efforts to the needs of the force.
Your major subordinate commanders brief you every quarter. What are your takeaways on that? I know you talked about metrics.
Yeah, so twofold. I'm a big mission command person, not command and control. I want commanders to understand my priorities and my intent, and I want them to feel empowered and enabled to go accomplish the mission without asking me for permission. And one of the ways I get updates is through my quarterly updates. It allows me to sit directly with the commander, his or her deputy, and their staffs and subordinate commanders, and receive back briefs and concept updates on what we're doing. And then that way, if they're on target, I say they're on target, move out. If they need a little guidance, I give a little guidance. Or if they need a big course correction, I do that. But I do it in a periodic basis so that it enables us to stay on track. But I am not executing for them. That's their job. My job is to provide them with the vision. What is the end state? What time do they need? What resources do they need? And then I enable them in that light. I expect them to do the work. So I do that through those updates. You mentioned metrics. We, the United States Army, Army Materiel Command, we're not very good at selecting and defining metrics to the output we're trying to achieve. We have to spend more time, starting with me, making sure that our end states of what we're trying to achieve are well defined, and then we establish and define the metrics to achieve those end states. We're getting better at that. Sometimes we get a little lazy in that we just go to our old metrics, and we have to put some intellectual effort and capital into developing the right ones. It's about seeing ourselves. You can't, if you're looking at the wrong picture, how do you know what to do next? So,
Right.
And I would just reinforce, it cannot be something that we're afraid to talk about, right? Our responsibility is to the warfighter. It's an ultimate responsibility. We provide logistics and material readiness to the men and women who will be in combat operations. All right? And so sometimes things aren't going to be right, but it's best that we know it so that we can correct it before something occurs. And we have a bad tendency, we collectively, right? We all want to solve the problem at our level. We don't want to raise things up. We want everything to be green. We're in a complex business. It's difficult, right? We have a lot of things going on simultaneously. We have some resource challenges we got to work through. We have to prioritize work. And at the end of the day, there's only so many of us, right? So what do we do? When do we do it? And how do we do it? We have to work our way through it.
Always going to have limited resources.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's about defining, and one of the reasons I go on that is so that I can clearly articulate or listen to the commanders define the operational risk. And then I take the monkey. They define it, I accept the risk, and tell them to move forward. Right? That's my responsibility.
Let's talk about the Warfighter for a minute, because you mentioned that. You've also visited lots of Army units in the field. You know, I was lucky enough to be at the first Cav with you.
Yeah.
What are the soldiers in the field and the commanders, really, of the divisions, of the corps, of the units in the field telling you about AMC?
Yeah, so I think we had a great reputation. Our reputation, you know, brought to us by previous commanders, as I mentioned, General Dunwoody and General Vi, enabled by our great workforce. We've already had a great reputation. I just think it's being magnified. As the op tempo is increasing, as the workload is increasing, as resources become more constrained and or restrained, AMC continues to deliver. And we're delivering not with perfection, but as Vince Lombardi used to say, strive for perfection, and you just might get good enough. And we are pretty close. And so, because of our great workforce, they're engaged, and people know who we are, and what we do, and how we go about our business. And most importantly, they know if we say we're going to do it, it's going to get done, and it's going to be right. And that's what I'm proud of.
Let's talk current operations and efforts underway across the command to improve material readiness. So supply availability has been a priority of yours. Can you explain that for those who haven't heard you talk about it, and give an update on where we're at with supply availability?
In simplest terms, and not to talk down, but just to keep the interview and my thoughts relatively simple.
Right, for the person in the basement who,
yeah, and me, the hard-working B student.
Right.
Okay. So what we want is to have enough repair parts in our Army to sustain our total fleet for both war, right, execution of war, and training for war, right? And right now, we don't have the breadth and the depth that we need. But we put a plan together 18 months ago. We prioritized our efforts in that plan, and we're making great strides. We're in this position not necessarily because we did anything wrong. We're in this position because of the way we were fighting the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. We stopped using many of our combat systems. Those combat systems were parked, and things weren't breaking. When things don't break, you don't need replacements. When you don't need replacements, the supply chain atrophies. That problem has been magnified by the fact that we resupply repair parts through the Army Working Capital Fund, and in simplest terms, if we don't sell what we have, we can't buy more. And we didn't necessarily have the right things on the shelves because we didn't have the right demands. When that happens, our funding goes down. Industry doesn't buy to resupply us, and we lose the skill of how to determine and replace broken repair parts. So it's those collective things that have occurred that have put us in a deficit in maintaining the right supply level for repair parts. So in simplest terms, supply availability, I want to maintain enough repair parts so that if we need it, we have it. We also have to manage it because we are constrained with our distribution capabilities, both tactically on the battlefield and strategically through air and sea lift. We want the right stuff at the right time at the right place. That takes a lot of effort from our demand planners and our leadership to define that. We apply resources to it, and we get great support from industry accordingly. Our strategy has been redesign our authorized stockage list and containerize them for deployability, prioritizing deploying units, the units going to Korea or Europe or to one of the training centers. Right? And then third, it's breaking down the equipment in its total, understanding all the repair parts for each piece of equipment, and then ensuring that we have a contract or a source associated with those repair parts. We've been doing it for 18 months. We've made great strides. We've increased the amount of money we're spending because we're having great sales, because our demand planners are making the right decisions on what we need. We have clearly kept the units that are deploying over 90%, which we ought to be pretty proud of. And then third, we've dissected each of our systems, and we understand what the requirements are. And now it's just about time and effort to codify that into execution. So I wish we were a little bit closer right now, quite frankly, but we're not. So I think it's another 6 months to where we really need to be.
A lot of progress in it.
It's significant progress, and I applaud the great work by the demand planners and the contracting workforce in ACC, TACOM, AMCOM, CCOM, and JMC.
So to that end too, on material readiness, equipment on hand readiness rates is another thing that we hear a lot about. We hear you talk about a lot. I know that we've divested quite a bit, but talk about why that's important and how we're improving our equipment on hand readiness rates.
Okay, so every day, you know, there's a set requirement for equipment out in the force. Those numbers fluctuate based on arrival of new equipment or modernization of equipment. And then what happens is old equipment is discarded. What we want to do is operationalize that effort. So when new equipment comes in, old equipment is turned in, and it's not cluttering up our motor pools and or other workspaces, right? So we can focus on our equipment that we need for the fight. So that's our number one priority, to declutter that. The second piece is there's enough equipment in the Army that's modernized and new that if we were to get it to the right places, every unit in the United States Army would have over 90% of the equipment authorized. And we're making progress on that, but we still have quite a bit of work to do. And so we're working to see ourselves. We lead sessions at my level to hold people accountable, and then we're partnering with all the units to make sure we move the equipment in a timely manner. That effort, those two efforts, will improve Army readiness significantly. We've already increased readiness across all three compos just in the last year. And we think that we can close this gap in about 2 more years.
So is the Build the Army effort, though, in the Security Force Assistance Brigades, that has thrown a wrench in some of?
No, I wouldn't say a wrench, but it's required us to reprioritize the work we're doing. So we're building the Army in several cases. We're building a 15th and 16th ABCT. Right. We're building 5 SFABs. We're increasing our capability in our Army preposition stocks. And then we are filling equipment on hand holes. So before we were just filling the holes of equipment on hand, now we're building the force. So it's just caused us to reprioritize and focus on certain units first.
Let's shift to one of AMC's most important charges, management of the Army's preposition stocks. Explain the importance of those sets, and then talk about the Combat Configuration Initiative, because that's somewhat new in your tenure.
So the program in general, without letting out too much information, is simply to put equipment where we think we might need it if there is an outbreak of war. And we have different types of equipment sets located around the world, everything from armored brigade combat teams to sustainment brigades and other supporting units. That equipment is located in different parts around the globe, and we are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of that equipment. When told to, units will fly over and draw the equipment and head into combat. I am 100% confident, based on the effort, quite frankly, by General Vi and our team here at the headquarters and Army Sustainment Command, that equipment is ready to go. What we've done, though, in the last year is we've increased its readiness by making sure that we've installed all communications equipment, weapons, and counter IED equipment. So now when a unit comes over, right, it will be able to quickly draw the equipment and move immediately out to the line of departure and be ready to engage the enemy. And we've reduced that time significantly down to 72 hours, which I'm very, very proud of. Strategically, what that's done, it's eliminated the requirement to bring things from CONUS. So we've reduced the amount of planes that'll be required to support us. That is a big deal when we're thinking about all that we have to do. So all in all, a great effort by the team. And we're not done yet. We're still dotting the I and crossing the T on that, but we're getting very close.
All right, sir, so thank you for joining us for segment 2, if you will, of our State of AMC. So we left off talking about current operations and initiatives and things that are important to Army Materiel Command, things that we're working on right now. And we can't really talk about that without talking about the Army's organic industrial base that AMC manages. Right. So, sir, if you would start by just talking about what's new with the depots, arsenals, and ammunition plants that make up the OIB, and what's important to you with the OIB.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to reverse a little bit on you, because we're going to talk about what's old. And what's old is our capability. 23 depots, arsenals, and plants are well established, well respected, great men and women working there that every day come and work hard to provide commodities, product, to our soldiers who have to go use it on the battlefield. That's a fact, and very proud of that. With that said, what we have to do is turn our eyes onto the future. And so we're working 3 initiatives in this light. One, we want to prioritize infrastructure, repair or replacement, and or facilitize the equipment in each of those depots, arsenals, and plants. And so I've directed a holistic review, which is not new. We've done this many times before. What's new is the guidance I've given, and we're going to prioritize our effort to the output required. So no longer is it going to be fair share. No longer are we going to equalize the money across all 3. We are figuring out where we need it first and most, and that's where money's going to go. And so we're working on that effort. That's number 1. Number 2, we are really turning our approach on how we workload the depots, arsenals, and plants. And that is going to be through leadership-led venues, starting at the depots, arsenals, and plants, and then being briefed to the 2-star generals and then to me. What we have to do is start taking charge and being responsible, and stop sticking our hand out for work. Oh, what a great capability, give us work, right? What we need to do is lead our organizations both efficiently and effectively. And I believe that we've had some great pockets of excellence in planning and implementing, but collectively across the board, we've been on autopilot. Those are my words. And I'd love for anybody to push back. Show me otherwise. And so what we're doing is we're instilling a battle rhythm. We're adding to our battle rhythm to track the things that I think are important, which leads me to number 3. Right? Number 3, it's not about the workload. It is about the product we produce. We must produce the product to our promise. Customer comes to us, we must execute, we must provide quality, which I'm confident we will, and we must hold ourselves accountable to timelines. That's our reputation, and that's what people expect. We've fallen off the mark a little bit on this, my perception. And it's causing us to manage more than we need to. And so my charter to the 2 stars and to the depot commanders, You say you can do the work, you better do the work. And you're going to demonstrate to me resources required, funding required, time required, and then we're going to hold ourselves accountable to the execution. If we do that, the respect that we garner will be well earned. We will reduce overhead. We will provide the workforce with consistent and predictable work from today into the future. We will reduce carryover, and we will be a better organization for it. If we don't change our approach to this, we're going to find ourselves out of business. Right? That's a fact.
So you mentioned the customer. Who's the customer for the OIB?
The customer is our soldiers, right? Our active, reserve, and National Guard soldiers. Everything we do goes to them. And we owe it to them to give them the very best piece of equipment on time because they're taking it into combat. And we want them to know, one, the equipment will be there when they need it, and two, it's the best piece of equipment on the battlefield.
Let's shift a little bit and talk about allies and partners and building security assistance. Allies and partners is a priority not just for the Army leadership right now, but for the Department of Defense. In fact, it's heavily in the National Security Strategy and National Defense Strategy too. But for people who don't really understand that, what's the importance of building security assistance, and what is AMC's role in that? USASEC, U.S. Army Security Assistance Command, is responsible for all of our foreign military sales. We do this for two main reasons. First and foremost, it is to build partner capacity. Right? We want the partners that are going to stand by us in war, or more importantly, maybe on their own so we don't have to go to war, to have the capability they need to execute war. And so what we do is we establish programs and we sell them Army equipment to enable that end state. Right? And it's a very powerful approach to doing that. And it's been very effective around the world in each of the COCOMs. The second reason why this is important is because we can't afford our own equipment to replenish it every year. We can only afford to buy new so often. And what we want to do is sustain the production lines, the industry capability, the organic industrial base capability, the supply chain that supports it. We want to keep that steady. And one of the ways we can do that is by enabling our partners to buy. When they buy our stuff, keeps our supply chain and our industry capabilities running smoothly. And then we can use it whenever we need it. So those two main reasons are the importance. And how's it going?
Extremely well. We are building a lot of partner capacity around the world, which in simplest terms means that when we go, there'll be somebody there to fight with us with equal capability. And we are energizing the industrial base, both commercial and organic, through these sales.
Are we focused on any one part of the country, or is it across all theaters?
All theaters.
Okay.
All theaters have different requirements. Some are responsible for, they're in immediate combat now and need different types of equipment. And some are just working peacekeeping, et cetera, and have different requirements.
Let's transition and talk a little bit about the future of AMC in the Army. So our third segment. So Army leaders are driving forward with initiatives to modernize, and we're hearing the word reform and reforming the way we do business. What are these efforts, especially like the creation of Army Futures Command? What does that mean for AMC?
So what we need to think about is what is our role, our purpose in support of the Army, right? And we are responsible for the logistics and sustainment and material readiness of all their equipment. And we are embracing this role, and we've been, in the last 2 years, we have really taken responsibility for the logistics and sustainment, planning and enabling of the force. This has not necessarily been our core competency. It's additive, but the workforce has done a great job adapting to that. The second part is how do we modernize our equipment, right? The material readiness of our equipment. The standing up of Army Futures Command is going to be focused primarily on equipment that we need in 30, 35, 40, the years 30, 35, and 40. And they will harness capability that's located in the Army, now will be located underneath Army Futures Command to do so. And that team will provide unity of command and unity of effort to produce the equipment we need. What we're still going to be responsible for is the sustainment of that equipment, the modernization in interim steps before the new systems come in. So equipment like Abrams, Bradleys, Strykers, Paladins, Blackhawks, Apaches, Chinooks, we're still going to be responsible for the sustainment and the material readiness of that equipment. And so the Futures Command will have a role, we'll have a role, and together we'll ensure that the Army is ready to go do its next mission.
Very good. So within the headquarters, one of your reform initiatives is Shape the Fight. You've started, unrolled the Shape the Fight initiative. What's your intent on how the command will look after Shape the Fight is fully implemented?
Yeah, so this is a great question. I really appreciate you asking. This is very important. This is not a resource/people reduction. This is our ability to take the great workforce we have and the talent that they demonstrate every day and put it in the right places and aim it towards the right targets. Currently, right now, our structure is based on the mission of AMC that was 50 years ago. And since AMC's come to fruition or come to stand in as a major Army command, we've taken on many roles and responsibilities. And lately, they've become more codified with the current Secretary and the Chief. And as I've said earlier, we're responsible for the logistics and sustainment of the force, as well as the material readiness of our equipment. The staff in our headquarters and each of our major subordinate commands are not organized to do those three things. And so what we need to do is see ourselves, understand our purpose as an organization, and then define the purpose by each directorate and staff section. And as we define the purpose, then we organize the positions to meet that purpose, and then we move faces into the places. Additionally, I would tell you that we're overstructured. And we're overstructured in that we have supervisors who are not responsible for supervising. We have people that have been inflated because we were worried about hiring, et cetera, et cetera. And so I've applied numerous business rules. GS-15s can't report to GS-15s. Supervisors have to supervise a minimum amount of people. There can only be 3 layers in any organization before a decision, right, can be made. Right now we have 7, 8, 9, 10 layers. And so we're implementing those. So it's about being effective. How do we operationally align our capability to our purpose? And then it's about being efficient. How do we ensure that the people we have are earning their monies to the output? What we need is everybody, we need 100% of the people doing 100% of the right work. Everybody has to grab the oars. Everybody has to row at the same time. We can't have people working 4 hours and people working 8 hours. We can't have some people getting bonuses. We can't have haves and have-nots. So.
Right. So headquarters is implementing.
Yes.
And the MSCs, what's their status?
So we use the headquarters as the incubator, right, to let me line out my vision, let me work through it with the staff, help people learn and understand what we were trying to do, and then develop the implementation plan. We walked through that whole process we are implementing right now. Now, 6 months into that process, we gave a warning order to commanders, 9 MSCs, and they are all executing mission analysis. And then this time next year, they'll be in full implementation. So then the whole command will be done by the end of 19.
So supervisors have heard you say, especially in this building, they've heard you talk about workforce flexibilities, and they've heard you charge them, us supervisors, to lead our way through it and not to let employees lead through workforce flexibilities. But sometimes the workforce doesn't hear that from you. They don't really understand what you mean by that. So can you just address, for the workforce, what is your intent with workforce flexibilities?
Yeah, so I'm a big advocate of this. I'd like to open it up, and I'd like our imaginations to run wild with us with one criteria. Anything we implement has to produce greater output, right? Not same output, not less output, greater output. But I am open to all recommendations. So easily said, but I'd love to put the whole headquarters on telework if it produced greater output. Okay, that is got to be our only criteria. It is not an entitlement. It is not an agreement. It is not a reward. It is about output. And as long as we're producing greater output, we have defined things that we're achieving and they can be accounted for accordingly, then I don't care. I mean, I telework on Saturday and Sunday. Right? So I'm all in. I'm a big fan of developmental assignments when used properly. When a leader determines that these individuals have potential, individuals have potential, and they've selected it, and they've mapped out thought processes for improvement, self-education, right? Government education, and or broadening experiences. And then we map it out, okay, we're going to send you for 3 months, we're going to bring you back, or we're going to send you for 6 months, and here's the output, and we're leading our way through it. It cannot be, I want to get away from my boss. I just am bored. I want to go do 10 different things. Again, it has to be about output. In that light, it is about personal output. It's about improving the individual to be something greater in our organization. It's not an entitlement. It's not a right. I'm also a big believer in rewarding people, right, for good work they do. But what I've told the supervisors and leaders is that's what it needs to be for. Not for pacification, not to make everybody happy. We want to reward those people that are doing two things. One, contributing more than what they're already getting paid for, and or providing us, which is that's a tangible result. You're doing more than what I pay you for, physically and mentally more. And then the intangible side of that is, hey, you could be contributing with attitude. You know, you're positive, glass is half full, we can figure this out, there must be a better way approach, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be both of those things. It could be either or, but it's got to be more than just doing your work and fair share. Right now, we do too much fair share, right? And this has a reverse effect on us. If we have people that are working hard and giving us recommendations and contributing positively every day, and we're giving them an award, and then we're in the same timeline, we're giving awards to people who don't, what's the incentive? What causes people to move forward? We have got to stop that approach. So.
Well, let me switch just a little bit and talk about budget. So, the NDA was passed, and a lot of people have noticed that it's the largest budget in a long time that the Department of Defense has gotten. So they want to know, does this give you extra bandwidth to balance today's needs and what you need today, or is this really not that big of an impact?
Well, first of all, we're grateful, and we all should be grateful for the great support we're getting with the monies. And so we can't take it for granted. That's number one. Number two, the monies are timely, and there's a lot going on, but readiness is cumulative. And so it can't be something you spend in one, catch up on in 1 year. You got to have predictable and consistent money over the years. And that has not necessarily been our case. So to your question, will this be a great ad for us? Yes, but it's only as good as it lasts this year. And next year we need the same, and the following year, and the following year. Because we need to be building on readiness over time, right? And we need the predictable and consistent funding. And last but not least, and probably most importantly, the funding we get, we must ensure we understand clearly what we are spending it on. What do we want? Where are we at? And holding people accountable. You know, we need to treat it like it's our own, it's coming out of our own wallet, right? And we need to get a little better at that, quite frankly.
What do you see ahead for the Army? Big question, but.
Well, I just would tell everybody we're a great organization, right? We're a great profession. Whether you wear a uniform or you're in civilian clothes, you're a part of the organization and the profession. And with that, though, comes great challenges. We have to be able to always meet our nation's requirements, right? We swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States, which means we are responsible for defending our way of life, okay? So it doesn't matter who the president is, who the Congress is, or who the generals are. If you raise your right hand, you're expected to support and defend the Constitution, which means our way of life. And you ought to be proud about being a part of that organization. From those who work at the lowest levels all the way up through me. And it's collectively that we will do well. It's not individuals, it's not certain organizations, it's the totality of the 120,000 people, military, Department of Defense civilians, and contractors working together, right? Synchronizing, integrating our capabilities to meet the output of the warfighter forward. That's what we face. I can assure you that the world will provide us challenges. We have job security. But we need to be very good at what we do. And that means we need to hold ourselves accountable to a very high level, and status quo is not going to be good enough. Because our enemy spends every waking day trying to figure out how to defeat us. We need to do the same. And it takes all of us together to do that.
All right, so before we wrap up, any final thoughts you want to share today?
No, I just would close. It's very humbling to be in command of this organization. It's an incredibly wonderful organization. And it's easy for me to take things for granted. We do so much. And everybody does contribute. And I'd just like to say thanks to what they do every day. As you've heard me say many times, and I am paraphrasing from one of our other great leaders, General Cody, who used to be the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, but his comment was, your proximity to the fight is not a direct correlation to the output to the fight. And no matter where you're serving in Army Materiel Command, whether it's forward or back here in the United States, or in a headquarters, or in a depot, arsenal, or plant, in an AFSB, in a CSB, in a trans brigade, or in one of our laboratories, you are really contributing to Army readiness, Army modernization, and the welfare of our nation, and I'm very grateful. Thank you.